Cool. All right. So apologies for the late meetup. Usually we have it much earlier in the month, but the problem was that we have two big conferences, two drone conferences that we do. One is AUVSI Exponential, and the other one is commercial UAV. And unfortunately, I was way too busy to do this because of all the stuff we're doing. Because my day job, basically what we do is we write mobile apps. So I don't just do the teaching. We write mobile apps for lots of different companies. But I'm always looking to share some information. So really that's for the new people who are here. That's really what we're trying to do. We're just trying to get some word out there. And the big news this month was that the Android 5.3 SDK came out, which was the first one that supports consumer drones. So now you can get access to the Android V5, the SDK from DJI. And before we were working with the V4, and the only other way that you could work with V5 is if you had one of the enterprise drones. So you're talking minimum about $5,000. So you have an order of magnitude of 10 now that you're able to use these drones. So I'm going to talk about the bit of news because there was 2 drops this month for the drones for the SDK. So 5.4 is already out. I'm going to talk about some of the differences between V4 and V5. We have done probably about a half dozen apps now using the new V5 for lots of different companies. So I just wanted to talk about what my developers are complaining about, just so that you know how long it's going to take if you're doing one of these apps. Don't be surprised if it's going to take you longer to do waypoints or missions or widgets. And then I'll talk about what sample apps are out there. I'll talk about how to use the sample app that DJI. It's a really cool app. They did exactly what they did with the V4 app. They basically created, like, their sample app it's not a Hello World app. It's just a massive app. It's huge, and it does everything. So we'll go through that in a little bit of detail. But it's actually not that straightforward to run. So then explain how you can get it to run and where you can find the information. And then next month, we're going to try and do swarms next month, which is actually in a couple of weeks now. It's on I think June 6th. So so that's right after this now for a few days, probably over this weekend, because it's a holiday weekend here in the US. I'm going to see if I can figure out how to get 4 drones to talk to each other using Mavlink. And if it doesn't work, we'll do something else next month. But I'm sure it will get something to work, or at least point people in the right direction. Okay. So news. So the big thing was AUVSI Exponential, which is on in Denver. Massive show, back to the pre-COVID levels. The one last year wasn't that big. The one over COVID was really sad. But now it's really back. The Denver was huge. I think it's going to be bigger again next year. Larger spots. Follow all the stuff on LinkedIn for what was happening. Seems to be a lot of stuff going on with drone for first responders. So lots of drones in a box, whether that's the DJI dock or whether that's Hextronics, Easy Aerial, all these other companies. So there seems to be a lot of work being done for having kind of that remote operation. Then the big news, as far as I was concerned, was when the SDK V5.3 was released, because it has the Mini 3 and the Mini 3 Pro support. So currently, I think to the end of the month, the DJI Mini 3 is $469 with the standard remote controller, which is this one here. I would not recommend going for the integrated remote controller. If you're using the V5 SDK from, for the past year or so, or past 18 months that it's been out, on the enterprise drones, there's a real headache trying to make sure that your app is running instead of the DJI Pilot or the DJI Pilot 2. So my recommendation, if you want to play with this stuff, is to go with the remote controller that does not have the built-in screen. It's also cheaper, and then you basically just run it off your phone. So that's what I've been doing all afternoon, is installing these apps and running them on my phone.
By that, do you mean don't use the RC Pro? Is that the one you mean not to use?
I can show you what one it is. So if we go, let's just have it. No, not. You can still use the Pro, but it's just the. So you see this one here. So this is the DJI Mini or the DJI Mini Pro, and it has a built-in screen. The remote controller has a built-in screen. This thing, don't do this.
Yeah,
go for the other one that doesn't have it.
Isn't it impossible to load an app on it anyway?
I haven't tried it with the screen. Sometimes you can because you can sideload them. So like that's the only way that we can run an app on the enterprise drone. So they each have their own enterprise controller. There's like, I don't know, there's 4 or 5 different versions. So we basically have apps and notifications, auto start, app disabled. Yeah. So if you can basically you can force close, and there is actually an example on the DJI sample app on the tutorial how you can force close the pilot. But I have in the past, what's happened is we use the Phantom 4 RTK, and you couldn't install anything else on it. And also, I don't know what version of Android is on that. I always want to.
Pro is 10, I think.
It is 10. Okay, that's cool.
Created from the smart controller.
Yeah. That's cool. That it's 10. So at least that's enough. But and then I'm pretty sure that there's no Google stuff in there. So there's no Google Play. So there's no Google Maps. So you have to use Mapbox, which may or may not be a problem for you. But I just like to use the phone because it gives you more control over what you're doing. So DJI Mini 3, DJI Mini 3 Pro support. I think the Mini 3 Pro is $769, if I'm not mistaken. So obviously, like the cheapest drone after that is the Mavic 3 Enterprise, which is the base model is I think 5,600, something around that. So that's a lot of money for starting to do this stuff. And also, if we have lots of people, we have at least half a dozen engineers working on the DJI SDK projects that we're working on, and kind of gets really expensive really quick. So it's great to be able to have something cheaper now that we do it. The other thing that happened is that the replacement for the DJI M300, which is the DJI M350, that was released after the show. We were pretty close to the DJI booth, and there was no mention of the 350, so that kind of appeared in the last week. And then over the weekend, I saw that the V5.4 was released, and the reason for that is because it has the M350 support. So I'm sure that the DJI M300 is kind of end of life now. The M350 is kind of about 14 grand, so maybe 15 with tax. Dollars, don't know what it is elsewhere. So yeah, that's an expensive drone. So it's great. So now we have the ability to start playing with the SDK V5, and that's important because V4 to V5 was a huge change. It felt to me like it was a complete rewrite of whatever they were doing. And then iOS has gone away, so there's no more iOS. It's Android only with V5, where there were 2 on the V4. And what else? Yeah, basically it's been announced, like the best way to find out what's going on with any of the DJI SDKs is just to subscribe to the issues on whatever the GitHub repo is, and you get a lot of information because people are asking questions about how to fix things. And then if you subscribe to the issues, it's a really good way to hear what's going on from the horse's mouth. They did say in one of the issues that the V4 is no longer being worked on. The only thing that they're doing is bug fixes. So it's in a support mode. So if you're going to do any DJI stuff moving forward, you have to really be working on the V5. So I think this is a great way to start off. I do have a link to the list of whatever the supported drones are. It's pretty easy to find, actually, if you go to the Mobile SDK. But it just tells you here, so we have the DJI Mini 3, the 2, the Mavic 3 Enterprise series, not the Mavic 3, oddly enough. So the Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 Cine are not supported. They're not supported by any SDK. And then the M30 series, so there's a M30 and M30T for the thermal, and then we have the M300 RTK, and now the M350 RTK. So, like I said, not cheap. So what are the biggest difference? So I asked my developers, what are you complaining about most? And we've written it's probably about half dozen. We did a wind turbine one. We did a one for mission planning. We've done one for a roofing company. So, you know, from start to finish. And the main issue that they are finding is that the waypoints is much more complicated. So there are things called WPML files. So I'll just show you this. This is the format here. So we have basically a zip file, which is called the waypoints name.kmz, and that's made up of a template, the waylines. I think we'll talk about in a second about what waylines do. But you have a bunch of settings in the template file, and then you have the resources, just like you have a resources in Android. And then you have the template. So, but that's basically just a giant XML file. So it's XML files of XML files. So it's kind of, and you need it for any of the things that you're doing. And then if you have routes that you had before that you did in the V4, then the only way to convert them to this is to upload them to Pilot. Because if you use the M300, that will work on V4 and V5. So if you have a route that you did with the M300, you'd basically upload it into the Pilot, and then the Pilot can export the new format. Otherwise, you're writing it from scratch. There aren't any utilities. It's painful. So just expect to spend more time doing that. The other thing that I was a little bit surprised about is when you work with the DJI SDK, basically what you're doing is that you're most of the hard work is done by the SDK itself, and the way that that's exposed is using widgets within your layout files. So you drag in an FPV widget, which is first-person view widget. So that gives you the camera, and you pull that into your. For those who are used to Android, you got your whatever your constraint layout is, your linear layout, and you just pull in the widgets, and that's how you build your app. So for the kind of non-DJI things, you're writing your own Android code, Kotlin code. But for whatever you're doing with the drone itself, you know, showing whatever the camera settings are, whatever, you're basically using the widgets that DJI provide you with. However, there's fewer widgets so far in V5 than there was at V4. So I know that on one of the projects that we did, we underestimated how long it was going to take because a lot of they wanted like a redo of the Pilot app, and a lot of the second and third level tier 3 widgets weren't done. So we basically just had to redo them, you know, in Kotlin. Not that it's bad, but it's so much easier to just drag and drop a widget and get it going rather than writing your own custom widget. So if you're doing something, don't be surprised if you can't find the widget. It might not be there. Okay, what else? So like I say, we're talking about the waypoints. So it's a zip file for the waypoints. So waypoints is, for those who are not used to this, a lot of everything that's happening with the enterprise drones is that they're running missions. So they're doing a grid pattern up and down, or they're flying around a cell phone tower. And, you know, that's kind of an issue now because people have done all these mappings for all the cell phone towers, and now they have a whole new different waypoint system that they have to redo. But either way, this is the world that we're in. So the WPML file, so waypoint mission file. So a mission is a flight plan, a route, an area that's defined in a field that you go up and down in a grid pattern. And then typically what happens is you send those images back to a server in the cloud, and then you use OpenCV or something to stitch all the images together. Or you use Pix4D or Mapware, any of those companies to put it together. So we have a breakdown of the resources, which is all the, you know, any of the images, so the reference target photos. The template file is convenient means for users to edit and plan routes. So we have a mapping aerial template. We got surveying templates, so it's different templates. And then the waylines is the execution file. So that defines where the drone is going to fly, and then if you're going to do anything with your payload. Because with the M300 and the M350, you can add your own payloads. So you can just, and the M30, thinking about it, you can basically plug in your own cameras or plug in the different things that you want to do. So that really is the two things that I'm hearing. I'm hearing that now that we have a good year or so experience in this, that the developers are liking the way that stuff is done now. It makes a lot more logical sense than it has done in the past. But just be aware of the gotchas. So there's two apps that I'm going to talk about now. I wanted to talk about the Hello World registration app. So when the V4 app, the V4 SDK came out, all of the tutorials were in Java. So we wrote a ton of them. If you know, it's a meetup that we did probably close to a year ago, and walked through all those tutorials. So we're trying to do them again because there's only one real tutorial for the apps that are out there. So the first one is the registration app. And you'll find as you get used to coding the DJI SDK that basically there's only about 10 different things that you're going to do. And so you're going to have a live stream, you're going to plan a route, you're going to connect to the drone, you're going to set up all the permissions and do all the key manager stuff. So the Hello World registration app, we do that. So I think it's an Android Studio. I think I have it open. Maybe not. Yeah, it's called Import SDK Demo. Okay. And I had to do something, so I'm not going to be able to run this now. Lessons learned. Okay, so this is a big lesson. Don't use the latest version of Android Studio because Android Studio, the chipmunk went to dolphin, dolphin went to eel, eel's gone to flamingo. So each of the different versions that have come out over the last year or so. I basically just could not get the sample app to work in the latest one, Flamingo. I went all the way back to Chipmunk because I knew that that was around at the same time, but I could still show you what the code is. So the code is very similar to what we have before in the V4 for what we're trying to do just for the basic registration. You have kind of an application level.
So Godfrey, I don't know if we're supposed to be seeing what you're talking about, but we're still looking at your slide.
See, there you go. Excellent. Top of the class.
There we go. Someone's paying attention.
Thank you. All right, let me do this then. Thanks very much, Brian. I do that all the time. I'm really bad at doing that. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me. Okay. So Android Studio. So I did this earlier today. This worked in the latest version of Android Studio, but when I tried to do anything difficult, it did not work. The sample app would not work. So what you basically have to do is you have to ask for a whole bunch of permissions, nothing that you wouldn't be surprised about. It needs to have access to the internet, needs to have find location, of course it does, needs to have Bluetooth, all the different things. So every time that you do an app, you're going to have something very similar to this. You're going to want to know, can I make it bigger? You're going to want to know how to do this. The main thing that you need is this Start SDK registration. So DJI are pretty vicious about making sure that they know who's using vicious is probably a bit harsh. They're pretty anal about making sure that everybody who uses an app has an API key. So what you do is you go to developer.dji.com, you open up an account. They used to charge for it. They don't charge for it anymore. You enter whatever your package name is. So com.res.import SDK demo, and you ask it, you tell it, what kind of an app it is. They're not really paying attention to it. It's really just, I think it's just an audit trail if they need to get anything that goes backwards, that goes wrong, to make sure that they can track you down. So you get your API key. They send you an email to say activate it. Every time that you do this, you have a key. And then you put your key into the way that most people do it is if you go to the Android manifest. So you put your key basically in here, and usually what you do is you just reference that in local properties. So that's typically the way that you do it. And then when local properties will be ignored because git ignore is going to tell it to ignore it. So then your keys aren't out there in the internet all over the place for people to see. Okay, so let's go back to the code again real quick. But you want to make one of the reasons that we do this is a lot of times the apps will fail because people didn't follow the the methodology that DJI have set up in order for you to be able to use their SDK. So this is kind of like the first level check to make sure that you get the start SDK registration, that everything works. So the DJI SDK manager is basically going to do a callback function to say, okay, I'm sending out the two things, which is the package name, and then the other thing would be the API key. Make sure that they match what we have in our database, and then you're good to go. And then in this, all I'm doing is I just have a little toast to say that if it was registered or not. So this is kind of like, for want of a better word, it's a headless demo using the, I'm just basically trying to make sure that I can import the different libraries. So let me find it now. So on build.gradle, here are all the different libraries that we have for DJI. So libDJI, libDJI SDK, the JNI. So that's the Java network interface. I think that's what it is. And then we have all the different things that you need in order to be able to do any of the DJI stuff. So this is, okay, now I've got my API, I've got my SDKs imported, I've got my build.gradle set up properly, and then we're good to go. One of the things that I am seeing here that's better than the first time around, there was this weird thing in V4 where they made you turn on ProGuard even if you had a debug build. So I guess we don't have to do that because that doesn't make any sense. You don't use ProGuard would obfuscate your code for just testing purposes. So they've fixed that, which is nice. And then we have, if you are going to use the APIs for the V4, the other big difference that we have is that there are now 3 API keys. So there's an API key for the airplane, there's an API key for the DJI libraries, and then there's an API key for whatever the handheld remote controller is. So you have to apply for 3 keys now in the new version. Okay, so let me stop this and I'll show you what it looks like real quick. Okay, so if it runs, basically, this is all I did was just use the standard hello world basic activity, empty activity that you get out of the box with Android Studio, and added the extra code so that we could get it. And if you go to, I'll show you the developer.dji.com website. You got to go here, go to Developer Center. Here's all, oh, it's going to make me log in, okay. Really? Really? Okay, now I'm confused. Are they stairs? Okay, so for example, the one that I just did there. So this is the information you get, and that's the app key, what we do. So that's what you got to do. You basically have to say create app, say what type of it is, give it the app name, package name is very important, and then category. I don't think they're doing anything with this stuff, but you never know. They don't, basically, I guess in the early days, for some of the SDKs, they wouldn't give you an API key unless they thought what you were doing was important. With these API keys, it's really formulaic. They just basically immediately you do it, you get this email, which just which looks like this, which says click the activation link below to activate your app, and off you go. You're good to go. Okay, so then the second one. So this is the I just did this today. This is in my office. As you can see, it's using a DJI Mini 3. It's got a Chinese map instead of an English map. Don't exactly know why, but it's just the sample app. But it's got all of the things that you would expect. So it has the connection up the top, GPS. It's got, you know, the remote controller, how much your battery you have left. So all of these things up at the top are widgets that are available to you to use and move around. I'm really digging this app. because there's a lot of stuff that's in here that is just much more well prepared than I was expecting. The thing that isn't well prepared is the information about setting it up. So what are we going to do? Let me show you this. So this is the official, how do I run the sample? How do I run the sample code? And then here's what I was saying. So you have 3 API keys that you need this time. So not just one, you need 3. So an all API key, aircraft API, and handheld API. Not 100% sure exactly what they mean. Aircraft is obviously aircraft, handheld, I'm assuming is the ORC, but I could be wrong. And then the whatever your map key is. So if you're using Mapbox, you do that. And then they have just the key store that's in here, which is kind of odd too as well. So if you open it, so I'm going to show you what that looks like. Stop sharing again. So you have to basically open it under the Android SDK V5.3, and then everything kind of folds into place. But it is huge. So you have the sample modules, all the different Java stuff in here. We have all our models. This will kind of make sense when I show you what the actual code looks like. So we have a simulator, some code for simulator. So we have some code for the RTK station if you're using that. So there's recording flights. What else do we have in here? Aircraft testing tools. So that's the coolest thing. That's why I like this, because they're actually exposing a lot of the information about how you do this, about how you do virtual sticks, which is what you do if you want to fly without waypoint missions. Basically, what you're doing is you're putting 2 black dots on the phone and using that to navigate, but you can also do it programmatically. So like that's an alternative, and that's basically what you got to use for the Mini 3, because there's no way that those WPML files are going to be working in the Mini 3. That's much more of an enterprise thing. They're not expecting you to run missions with a Mini 3, so you got to learn how to use virtual sticks. So all the code is here. Like I said, I would 100% recommend using Chipmunk or Dolphin. Do not go any higher in your version of your Android Studio, because you're not going to get anywhere. What we're going to do is basically slowly peel this back so that we can just create the much simpler versions of what we're trying to do. Okay, I got to go back to where I was. Hold on a second. Help if I get out of the way. Okay, so then this is the one thing that if you could take this away from anything else we're going to talk about today, it's this link. It's this guy, William Wong. I am just so happy with what he produced. So this came out about 10 months ago. So he basically walks you through exactly the run sample. Doesn't make any sense. You could spend, a half a day trying to figure out, I don't know, you've got 3 folders to choose from in sample code V5. So if we go to, this is the code for sample code V5. So we go to sample code V5. I got 3 things to open. They're not telling me which one to open. It turns out it's this one. But like I said, William Wong is the guy who gives us the gold here for what you need to do. Explains the importance of making sure that you're using the right package name when you're applying for your aircraft API key, then tells you where to put it in. And then also there's another tutorial which is integrating the SDK into your project. And this is also gold. So if you got past, okay, the first thing you do is you get the sample app working, everything's going great, you think it's brilliant, I want to write my own app. And then you go back to the tutorial, which says, no, I can't find it now. Go back. The tutorial, which basically says, how do I, this is tutorial run sample. Let's go back to this. How do I integrate my own app? We have run sample code, empty project, import MSDK. So this is really hard to follow. So I would again go back to the example that William Wong has and walk through everything that he explains here in glorious detail. So you set up your application. So you have an application context, so I can pull in the DJI library and have it as globally spread across all your apps, so everybody has access to it. Tells you what you need to do to access all the different SO files for the libraries, what the permissions need to be, what you need to add to the Android manifest.xml, because you have to add the USB information. And the reason you have to add the USB information is because the Android phone has to know that when it plugs in a USB, that it needs to run your app. So this use features needs to be in there in your Android manifest. Android manifest also needs to define that you're an application level class. That's the first class it's supposed to go to. Otherwise, it's going to go to main activity. It's not going to work. And then whatever intent filters we need to add as well. And then we have a MSDK init method to start off the MSDK. This is very similar to the registration stuff that we did, that I showed, but it's it's a lot smaller. Also, in order to use the widgets, you need the second library, which is the UX SDK library. And this is now open source, so it wasn't open source before, and I'm guessing that's where the rewrite came in, and why we have a few less widgets than we had before. So there is no point in doing Android development and trying to create something like this on your own. You need to make sure that you're using the UX SDK, because it gives you access to all these absolutely beautiful objects that you can just pull into your code. And let me see if I can find where it is. So we go to sample code. See if I can dig down. It's using modules as well, which is kind of a modern thing to do with Android. So that might take a while to get used to. US XDK activity. So this is basically, we're looking at the layout for the page that I just showed you with the, of our office from the DJI Mini 3. In order for me to get that widget, I basically just have to include this DJI V5 UX core widget, FPV widget, and then it just basically gives me that interaction. And then we have a tool top bar panel widget, remaining flight time widget. So I'm not coding any of this. This is just giving this to me for free. So it's I would not code any DJI SDK app without using the UX SDK, because through whatever binding they're doing in the back end, you basically get the NDVI panel widget, camera visible panel widget, all the auto exposure stuff. So you're basically getting all this stuff by basically just filling in a layout file, and you know which widgets to use. So then I guess the question next is, what widgets can we use? So if you run the sample application, this isn't the first page that you get. This is the first page you get. So you have 3 basic choices within the sample app. You get the default layout, which is what we just saw. The widget list, which is an entire exhaustive list of all the widgets that are available. I'm hoping that when it comes out, they're just updating that widget list so we can go through and look at them. So air sense widget, altitude widget. If you click on this, then it will then show you what the widget looks like, what the parameters are, and all the information that you need for the battery widget or the auto exposure widget. So if you're, you can look through the documentation, but you can also look through this to see, the latest and greatest of all that you have. And then if you click on the testing tools, pretty similar to what we have here in our list of choices. So we have, this is William Wong again, key manager, video decode, live streaming, virtual stick, waypoint mission, camera, media playback, airlink, gimbal, remote controller, battery, flight controller, visual obstacle avoidance system, diagnostics, third-party payload, and remote ID. Remote ID is, of course, really important because you won't be able to fly a drone after September without remote ID. You won't be able to fly it legally anyway. So if you can go through here, and then basically it will show you the code in action. So if we go for virtual stick, for example, then this is how virtual stick works. So then we can see an implementation of virtual stick. So enable virtual stick, disable virtual stick, set whatever the speed is, take off, and then land, start, stop, use, remote controlled stick value. So yeah, you can, basically do this to control the aircraft. And you don't really have, this, obviously there's no visual here. You're pretending that you're the remote controller because you're making it go up, down, left, right by these two black dots here. And then we just have a little compass thing in the center. And then if you go back to the code, I don't know if I'm going to be lucky enough to find it. If I go to sample, app aircraft, source main. No, it's not that one. Module aircraft. Pages. Yeah, so we have our virtual stick fragment. So then you can start going into the virtual stick fragment, see what it's doing to create this, and then copy that if you want to implement your own virtual sticks. Now, personally, I think that's there's so much in there that it's, from my perspective, because I'm trying to teach people how to do this, whether it's employees or whether it's people in college, I want to be able to pull that out. So what we'll probably do over the summer is get the interns to turn this into individual apps, one that does missions, one that does cameras, one that does live streams, and then we'll release that sometime later in the year so that everybody can see it. But for the moment, I think this is great. So basically, hey, I want to know how to do log into my account. How do I log into it? How do I upgrade my firmware? How do I run the simulator? You just click on the link and then it's right there for you. Okay, so tips. Stick with an earlier version of Android Studio. I couldn't get the sample app to work with Flamingo. The reason I downloaded Flamingo is because it's got that Android Studio bot, which is the cool new tool that Google released at Google I/O, which is a really great teaching tool for people to learn how to do, compose or whatever else. Oh, I guess that's something else we should say as well. So compose is the new thing in Android Studio. So people aren't using layouts anymore. I don't really know if there's a way to use the DJI widgets with compose. I don't think there is. So we may be stuck not using compose and all the DJI SDKs. Anyway, first point is stick with an earlier version of Android Studio. So make sure you're using Chipmunk or Dolphin. I did not test it on Dolphin. It probably works on Dolphin, but it won't work on Eel and won't work on Flamingo. Estimate more time for creating waypoint missions and custom widgets. So if you're doing estimates for your boss or just, wondering if, how many days it's going to take you, the widgets that aren't there, it's going to take forever. And, it's just basically, it's your own layouts for whatever widgets that you want. And the waypoint missions, we have to go to the WPML files. It takes a while to understand that. You always use William Wong's forum page because that just seems to be so much better than the documentation that's up there at the moment. Hopefully it changes. For enterprise drones, you need to force close the Pilot 2 app. There is an example on that on the tutorial. The SDK is no longer being updated. It's bug fixes only. And then my recommendation is not to buy the remote controller with the screen. Stick with the phone if you're using the DJI Mini 3. All of the URLs that we talked about. So that's the registration, and gradually as we add different ones, that will add more later. This is, I'm always getting asked what are the plans for the future? So this is a month ago. So there is no plan to support Mavic 3, Mavic 3 Cine, and Mavic 3 Classic. No plan to support Mini 2. No plan to support DJI Avata, which is the FPV drone, I think. I don't have one of those. This is the URL for all things Mobile SDK. There's also one for the UX SDK. This is the overview of the tutorial. This is running the sample. And the last one is the William Wong's forum post, which is the one that I think is the one thing that you should pay attention to from this tutorial, because it's going to make your life easier because you're going to be able to find all the things that you want. And then next month, we are going to do swarms. So I'm going to see, we have we did a few, entered a few people into the NXP hover games over the last few years. So we're going to see if we can get 4 to 6 drones working in a swarm. We're supposed to have that done by, I think the next meetup is the 6th of June, because this was delayed because of AUVSI. So wish us luck with that one. That should be fun. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm going to turn off the recording, I think.